You think you are human. You are right, but you are not the only kind of human that ever lived. You are the last one. Once, this planet was crowded with people who were not quite you. They walked on two legs. They lit fires. They buried their dead and held their babies and looked up at the same moon you look up at now. And then, one by one, every single one of them vanished. All of them, except yours. Where did they go? Rewind 300,000 years. If you could stand on the earth back then and look around, you would not see one human story. You would see many, running side by side, like separate rivers cutting across the same land. In the cold north, there were the thick-boned ones, wrapped in muscle, built to survive winters that would kill you. Far to the east, in caves along the mountains, lived another kind, so mysterious that we only know them from a single finger bone and a few teeth. On a small island, cut off from the world, there was a tiny people barely a meter tall, and spread across the warm middle of the planet were older kinds still, some who had been walking the earth for nearly 2 million years before you showed up. Think about that. 2 million years. Your kind has existed for a few 100,000. These other humans were not failed drafts. They were not stupid. They were not waiting around to become you. They were successful in their own right for longer than you have been. So this is not a story about weak creatures losing to a stronger one. It is stranger than that. Start with the thick-boned ones in the north. You have heard their name used as an insult. That is a mistake. They had brains as large as yours, sometimes larger. They made tools with real skill. They controlled fire. They cared for their sick and their old, which we know because we have found skeletons of individuals who lived for years with injuries that would have made it impossible to feed themselves. Someone fed them. Someone chose to. That is not the behavior of a brute. That is the behavior of a family. They survived in Europe and Western Asia for hundreds of thousands of years. Ice ages came and went, and they held on. They hunted enormous animals up close with heavy spears, driving them into ambushes. It was dangerous work. Their bones show it. Many of their skeletons carry the kind of fractures you see today in people who ride bulls for a living. They lived hard, and they lived brave, and for a very long time they lived just fine without you. Then you arrived. Somewhere around 60,000 years ago, your ancestors walked out of Africa in a wave that would eventually reach every corner of the planet. And as they moved north and east, they walked straight into the worlds of these other humans. Two kinds of people meeting for the first time. What happened next is one of the biggest questions there is. Here is the part that surprises everyone. You did not simply wipe them out. You slept with them. We know this for a strange and beautiful reason. It is written inside you right now. If your family comes from anywhere outside of Africa, a small piece of your DNA, usually around 2%, did not come from your own kind at all. It came from those thick-boned northern people. When your ancestors met them, some of them had children together, and those children had children. And that thread was never broken. It runs all the way down to you. So a part of them is not gone. It is you. It is in your body deciding how your immune system fights off illness, how your skin handles cold, even how well you sleep. You are, in a very literal sense, part of the thing you replaced. But make no mistake, as a separate people, they still disappeared. Around 40,000 years ago, they faded out. The last of them held on in a few pockets at the far edges of Europe. And then there were none. Why? There is no single villain in this story. It is more like a slow squeeze. The climate at the time was wild and unstable, swinging from cold to warm and back again faster than a body could adapt. The big animals they relied on were shifting and thinning out. And now there was a new kind of human on the same land, eating the same food, hunting the same herds. Two peoples, one dinner table. When resources get tight, even a small disadvantage becomes deadly over enough generations. And you may have had small advantages. Your kind seems to have hunted from a distance, throwing lightweight spears and later using tools that launched them even harder. That means you could kill without getting close, without the broken bones, without losing hunters to a cornered animal. Your groups may have been larger and more connected. You traded objects across long distances, which means you had networks, friends of friends, a web of people who could help when times were bad. You made art. You carved little figures, painted walls deep inside caves, wore beads. That is not decoration. That is symbolism, the ability to hold an idea in your head and share it. It knit strangers into a tribe. None of this made you better as a person. It made you better at not dying in a bad decade. And over thousands of years, being slightly better at not dying is everything. Now leave the cold north and travel east to those mysterious cave people we barely know. For a long time, we did not even realize they existed. Then, in a Siberian cave, someone found a single fingertip bone. It looked ordinary, but the DNA inside it belonged to a kind of human no one had ever seen. A whole population, an entire branch of the family, revealed by one broken finger. They ranged across a huge stretch of Asia. And like the northern people, they did not fully vanish either. Their blood is in living people today, especially across the islands and highlands of the Pacific and Asia. One gift they left behind is remarkable. High in the mountains of Tibet, where the air is so thin it can make you sick just to walk, people carry a version of a gene that lets their bodies handle low oxygen. That gene did not come from your kind. It came from those cave people. They lived up there long ago, adapted to the heights, and handed that survival down through interbreeding to the people who live there now. A vanished species, still keeping their descendants alive on the roof of the world. Then there is the island, far out in the sea, on a piece of land called Flores. Something extraordinary happened. A kind of human got stranded there, generation after generation, with nowhere to go. And over time, they shrank. They became tiny, barely a meter tall, with brains much smaller than yours. Not because they were failing, because on an isolated island with limited food, being small is smart. It is the same reason the island also had miniature elephants and giant rats. Cut off from the mainland, life rearranges itself into strange new shapes. These little people made tools and hunted and survived on that island for a very long time. And then, roughly around the time your kind was spreading through that part of the world, they too disappeared. We do not know exactly why. Maybe the volcanoes that shook their island. Maybe the changing world. Maybe, again, the arrival of you. Do you see the pattern forming? Go further back and it only deepens. Before any of these, there was an older kind of human that spread farther and lasted longer than almost any of us ever have. They were the first to truly master fire, the first to walk out of Africa and populate distant lands, the first to build the kind of tools that took real planning. They endured for nearly 2 million years. 2 million, your entire species, every empire, every language, every face you have ever loved fits into a tiny sliver at the end of their run. And yet even they, the great survivors, eventually thinned out and were gone, lingering longest on the far islands of Asia before the last of them slipped away. One by one, the rivers ran dry. The thick-boned northerners, the mysterious cave people, the tiny islanders, the ancient wanderers, and others still, a whole tangled family tree of humans. Some we have named, some we have found only in fragments. Some we surely have not found at all. At one point, there may have been 6, 7, 8 kinds of humans sharing this planet at the same time. And then, after all of it, there was one, you. So ask the real question, not just how they died, but why you didn't. The honest answer is humbling. It was not because you were the strongest. The northern people were stronger. It was not because you were the smartest in the simple sense. Their brains matched yours. It was not because you were meant to win. Nothing was meant. There was no plan, no destiny, no invisible hand choosing your kind and crossing out the rest. What you had was a combination, big, connected groups, long-distance friendships and trade, the habit of making symbols and stories that could bind 100 strangers into one people, a body and a diet flexible enough to survive when the world lurched, and time and luck and the sheer accident of being the branch that happened to be standing when the music stopped. If a few things had gone differently, if a drought had hit your ancestors harder, if a volcano had erupted a little closer to home, it might not be you telling this story at all. It might be one of them, looking at a bone in the dirt, wondering what happened to the strange, tall creatures who once shared their world. Because that is what you are, to all of them. You are the one who is left. You carry pieces of them in your blood. You walk the same ground where they walked. The winters they survived, you survive with the help of their genes. The heights, the illnesses, the long cold nights, they helped you get through them without ever knowing you would exist. They are not entirely gone. They are folded into you, quiet and permanent. A family that never truly ended, only narrowed down to a single surviving line. You think you are human. You are. You are also the last chapter of a much longer book. the only one still being written, holding the whole story of every other human who ever was. Where did they go? Look in the mirror. Part of the answer is looking back.